Right now, somewhere in your memory, you can recall your first day of school, a childhood home, a face, a smell. But there is one moment, the single most extreme moment of your entire existence, that you cannot access at all. The moment you arrived. And the real reason why is far stranger than you have ever been told. You have no memory of being born. You know that. Everyone does. But here is what almost nobody talks about. Your body was there for every single second of it, and it has never stopped carrying what it learned. Think about what birth actually is. For 9 months, your entire world was darkness, warmth, muffled sound, the steady rhythm of another heartbeat pressed against you from every direction. You had never felt cold. You had never taken a breath. You had never experienced silence or light or the feeling of open space around your skin. Then all of it ended in hours. Your lungs inflated for the first time. Air hit your skin. Light struck your eyes with a brightness that had no context. Sound arrived without any filter. Your temperature dropped. Your heart rate changed. Your body was flooded with more simultaneous sensation than it would ever experience again in a single moment. By any honest measure, it was the most intense experience of your life. And you remember none of it. Why? The answer starts with a small, curved structure deep inside your brain called the hippocampus. This is the region responsible for converting your experiences into retrievable long-term memories. The mechanism that takes what is happening to you right now and files it somewhere you can find it later with words and images. At the moment of your birth, your hippocampus was not finished. The neurons existed, but the dense web of synaptic connections required for memory encoding at scale was still forming. Developmental psychologist Patricia Bauer spent decades at Emory University studying this exact window. Her research showed that the hippocampal system in early infancy is neurologically immature in a very specific way. It can receive experience, it can process sensation, but it cannot yet bind those experiences into the kind of memory that conscious recall later requires. You felt everything at birth. You retained nothing you can retrieve in words. Neuroscientists call this window infantile amnesia. It is not unique to birth. Most people cannot retrieve any explicit memories from before the age of 2 or 3. But birth sits at the far end of that window, the most extreme experience in the most neurologically unprepared moment of your life. You were overwhelmed at the very instant you were least equipped to record it. But here is where the story changes. Explicit memory. The kind you can narrate is only one kind of memory your brain produces. There is another kind. It is older. It is deeper. It does not live in the hippocampus at all. It lives in the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, the amygdala, the body's own nervous tissue. Scientists call it implicit memory. It is the memory that lets your hands type without thinking about your fingers. The memory in your legs when you ride a bicycle. The memory that makes your shoulders drop when you hear a familiar piece of music. Implicit memory does not require the hippocampus. It does not require language. It does not require you to be consciously old enough to record anything. It begins forming before birth. And it never stops. Developmental psychiatrist Daniel Stern, whose decades of research into infant experience produced a foundational body of work that changed how scientists understand early life, described what he called vitality affects, a pre-verbal, pre-linguistic form of experience encoding that happens through rhythm, intensity, and contour rather than narrative. Your nervous system, even before you had words, was learning the shape of experience, not the content, the shape. The pattern of tension and release, the quality of pressure, the difference between a sudden shock and a slow wave. Your body was taking notes in a language that has no alphabet, and this is where it becomes quietly unsettling. Researchers in somatic psychology, the study of how the body holds experience, have argued for decades that the implicit record your nervous system built in those first hours does not simply disappear as you grow. It becomes architecture. The baseline patterns of your nervous system, including how quickly you enter a stress response, how your body responds to sudden loud sounds, how certain kinds of firm pressure feel inexplicably calming while other kinds feel like threat, were shaped in part by those first overwhelming moments of life. The compression of the birth canal, the sudden release into open space, the first cold air, the first touch of a human hand that was not the interior of a womb. Your body was encoding all of it through the oldest memory system it had. You were still walking around in a body that absorbed that experience. You just cannot read what it wrote. Now consider what happened in the minutes after you were born. For the first time in your existence, you were separate. The umbilical cord was cut. The constant hormonal exchange between your body and your mother's stopped. The nervous system that had never once been alone was suddenly, completely alone, and flooded with more sensation than it had ever processed. Neonatologist Nils Bergman, whose research into newborn neuroscience reshaped hospital protocols around the world, showed through careful measurement that separation immediately after birth activates the newborn stress response with measurable force. Cortisol surges. The autonomic nervous system shifts into threat detection. The body does exactly what it was built to do when something has gone wrong. It sounds an alarm. But when skin-to-skin contact was restored, when the newborn was placed against its mother's chest, the alarm quieted almost immediately. Heart rate stabilized. Cortisol levels dropped. Breathing regulated. Temperature steadied. The nervous system found the signal it was looking for and stopped searching. Your body knew the difference between safe and not safe before your brain could form a single retrievable thought. And here is the part that should stop you. That wiring did not vanish when you grew up. Psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk, whose decades of clinical research on trauma and the body produced findings that permanently altered how therapists understand the nervous system, showed that the patterns laid down in the earliest experiences of life continue to influence how a person regulates emotion, connects to others, and responds to threat well into adulthood. The nervous system, he found, does not simply override its early templates. It builds on top of them. The earliest layers remain underneath. This is not a life sentence. It is not destiny, but it is biology. The pathways your nervous system carved in those first hours, in response to warmth and cold, to held and unhelted, to sound and silence, and the feeling of being contained or released, are among the most deeply embedded pathways in your entire body. They shaped what followed, everything that followed. There is a concept in somatic therapy, sometimes called body memory. Not a clinical term, but a shorthand for something researchers have noticed repeatedly in adults under extreme stress. A sudden, wordless, pre-verbal flooding of overwhelm that feels older than any experience the person can consciously name. Some researchers have speculated that under sufficient physiological pressure, the nervous system can briefly touch the edges of its earliest implicit records. The patterns that were never words becoming briefly, disturbingly present again. You have never consciously visited the moment of your birth, but your body has never fully left it. Think about what it means to know that. The version of you reading these words right now is older than your oldest memory. Before you had a name for yourself, before you understood what language was, before you had any model at all of what the world was like, your body was already building one. From pressure, from temperature, from the rhythm of being held or not held, from the first sound that was not filtered through amniotic fluid. Everything you have become was built on top of that foundation. The things that calm you, the things that instantly alarm you, the way certain spaces feel safe before you have thought about why, the way your body responds to being touched or cold or suddenly exposed to an unfamiliar sound. These are not only your adult experience speaking, they are something older speaking. A record made before you had any way to know a record was being made. You never chose what your nervous system learned at birth. You were not asked. You were not there in any sense you can access now. But your body was there. Your body was paying attention. And right now, in this moment, you are still living inside what it learned.